afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this week's Workshop Wednesday. In today's session, I will hand over to our sales executive, Alvaro Santillan, and he'll be providing an overview of Sesame in the session, Powering the Modern Multifamily Office with Sesame. So obviously we understand the complexities that multi-family offices face in managing wealth across multiple families. So really this session is designed to explore how Sesame can simplify reporting, enhance decision-making, and really streamline the management of complex ownership structures, really to enable our multi-family office clients to improve their efficiency and ultimately improve their client satisfaction. So with that, I'll hand over to Alvaro to kick off the session. Alvaro, over to you.
So thank you very much for the intro, Amy. And well, the idea today, as Amy mentioned, is to showcase our wealth management solution for multifamily offices. And well, before giving a demonstration of our platform and the actual user experience within, let's briefly touch upon some of the most common challenges that multifamily offices encounter in the world of data aggregation, analytics, and reporting. So the purpose of this is, as families are invested across the investment spectrum, which means a large variety of asset classes and sectors, typically a significant amount in private assets, well, data comes from different sources and in varied formats and schedules, which makes it difficult for a multifamily office to consolidate all this data and report the full picture of wealth to their clients in a seamless way. In fact, MFOs typically find themselves with endless waiting to receive the latest public and private assets data, along with data discrepancies that eventually damage client relationships, also reduced access to multi-asset cash flow performance and risk analytics. We're talking about manual creation of reports, lacking granularity, customization, and immediacy, also decentralized stakeholder data that complicates workflows within the business. And finally, the management of complex ownership structures is also a challenge, which makes analysis and reporting at different sub-entity levels an extremely challenging task. And all this, well, ends up signifying a lot of time lost and usage of many resources, clearly, which is precisely why we built Landytech's Sesame platform, a wealth management solution for MFOs that covers both public and private assets in near real-time data. We're looking at T+1 here. So supported by our team's extensive expertise in asset management, risk management, and alternative products, from our leadership to all departments, also our sizable team of data analysts, risk analysts, and developers, and our institutional partnerships, such as the one we have with MSCI for institutional grade risk analytics. We provide MFOs like yourselves with a 360-degree service that effectively eliminates the tech infrastructure and data implementation burdens from the equation. The purpose of this is so wealth managers and advisors, like many of you here today, can benefit from a comprehensive and personalized digital experience and solely focus on wealth planning and investment decision making. So let's dive quickly into how our data flows into our system. Picture it in two layers: the back end, which is the data management layer, and the front end, application and reporting layer. And in terms of what we do with our data, well, on the one hand, if the assets in question are custodied or accessible, let's say, in a more automated way, what we first do, let's say, is extract the data by setting up feeds directly with the client's different sources, whether it's a custodian bank, administrator, broker, PMS, even a back office system that you may already have. Whatever it might be, we will collect holdings and transaction files directly from that source. We consider ourselves data agnostic because we can connect to anything as long as the other party is willing to open the door, and that is usually the case based on experience. We then transform the data, in other words, standardize it to make it uniform. We also do a lot of validation work, double checking things like exposures, prices, odd corporate actions, or even large changes in quantities in holdings files from one date to another, for example, for which transactions do not match such changes. No, we do reconciliation here too. And once everything checks out, we store all our standardized data in our Microsoft Azure centers in Ireland, backed up in Amsterdam, to completely secure our clients' confidential data through strong encryption processes. Not only for the storage, let's say, of data, but also for the movement of data across our front end. And we finally enrich our data through partnerships we have with other data vendors like MSCI I mentioned, to give our clients an extra edge when making investment decisions through our platform. Asset class data enrichment, among other things. And on the other hand, for uncustodied assets for which no, let's say, direct feeds could be implemented, we take care of those positions and transactions through our internal portfolio management system or investment hub, where one can create its assets and then associate transactions and valuations to these. Okay, these could be private funds, direct company investments via private equity or debt, properties, collectibles, etc., etc. Okay. And as we speak, just a quick note, I'd like to mention that we're developing an AI parsing tool that will be available in the coming quarters. All this to analyze documents via AI, such as capital call notices or statements for PE funds, and be able to populate this data much faster into Sesame. Okay. Finally, on the right-hand side, clearly, this is where we would picture the data calculated, transformed, enriched, and ready for action through our next generation dashboard, which is Sesame. And the idea is you can slice and dice across by the dimensions of exposures, performance, risk, and many other hundreds of metrics that we have available. Of course, we make only a subset to be able to view them, but there's many more. It's your data playground for those deep portfolio insights. Okay, so that is our data architecture in a nutshell. Briefly, let's touch upon capabilities. We got data management, as I said before. You will find the full picture of wealth in one place. Then cash flow performance and risk analytics powered by MSCI risk analytics and Barra One, where you'll be able to leverage from institutional grade risk. Also entity and portfolio monitoring that enables getting alerted portfolio oversight here through notifications to notable changes in key metrics or specific limits you want your portfolios to have, all to make sure that your clients are, let's say, in line with their investment objectives and risk profiles. Okay, and also automated and customized report generation. Clearly, you can build report from scratch. We'll see that in a bit. Reusing templates and scheduling these, and also a collaboration hub, very much like a CRM, in which you can manage contacts, associate assets, and delegated tasks from the same platform. So this is very useful, a very useful function to optimize internal workflows and the work you do, not only internally, but with clients potentially if they have access to Sesame. Okay, so let's now move into how our product works and go to Sesame once and for all. Okay, so as a desktop user, we will be connecting via app.landytech.net. That's our link. This is where you would put your username and password. And what will happen here is we will be taking directly to the main general dashboard. So as an MFO, after we've covered the implementation phase, you'll find your list of clients at the bottom and the general overview of these. Okay, so the objective here is to select any client of ours. In this case, let's choose asset owner as an example, as if he was client 3, and we'd be able to, first thing to see is the general asset allocation. So all public and private assets. We're talking about PE co-investments mixed with corporate bonds, properties, cash, and so forth. So Nirvana for every advisor and beneficiary. Their cumulative performance compared to a selected benchmark, which could be a customized composite, and of course a more analytical overview, let's say, of the client's situation in the table below. So the date of inception of that client, for example, could be the currency limits breach, the market value itself versus the cost value, and performance, both in absolute and let's say relative or percentage terms in this case. And a key thing to note here is that you'll be able to, of course, select another client. I could click on FO Holdco as another client example, and the charts above will adapt accordingly. Okay? We might not only want to have a view of the highest level of this client, which is the holding company, but also an entity below. It could be an operating company or a FinCo, or even specific portfolios within a FinCo, like clicking on Big Debt Multi-Asset in this case, right? Charts would update accordingly, and you'd be able to see all that info for that specific scope. And well, as an interesting note, you can personalize your dashboard in pretty much any module in Sesame by changing the graphics. We might want a bar chart here instead of a pie chart, for example. You can also modify your pre-existing set of parameters, like clicking on these 3 dots will take us into settings, and we'd be able to include different parameters from a subset we're giving you. Clearly, we can add more to these and have calculated ones too, and then click save to visualize that on spot. Okay. Another important thing to note is you can export everything to Excel and PDF, not only the page, but the single components. And interestingly, you can create notes and create tasks on any page. Let's take, for example, here you will be selecting, we want to review, let's say, the month-to-date performance, for example, of our operating company. So we'd be setting a task here for someone in particular, review month-to-date performance, here for the sake of it, and we'd be able to assign it to a particular person. In this case, assign it to myself, due date, reminders, priorities. You can also set a status on the progress, and of course, link this task to a particular asset or a company or contact and so forth. Now we'll be able to see that in the Manage tab, which is the collaboration hub. But the idea is that this Sesame works in a very flexible and dynamic way. Okay? Now go to the ownership structure. So as you've seen with our FO Holdco as a client example, we also allow for the visualization and replication of complex ownership structures for each of your clients. So the analytics and reporting could be done at different sub-levels. So let's click on this client in particular. And well, the idea here is that you can go from holding company to sub-entity level to lower legal entity level and down to portfolio level. Okay, even single instrument is something you could look at in broader terms here. Okay, so let's take FO Holdco into this example. And from here, what we could see is that on the one hand, the way we've pictured this ownership structure is there's a financial company with all our connections to our banks and custodied wealth managers. We have, for example, a discretionary mandate with Pictet, a multi-asset one. We also have our Credit Suisse cash accounts, more liquid assets here, and investments in alternative funds through our UBS. So this is a way you could structure your data to be able to then analyze in a more detailed way in the other tabs that we'll be seeing. Okay, and on the other side, there's the operating company, for example, right, in which we have more direct investments. So it could be a mixture of cars or properties and direct company investments, as you can see here, hotels. And the way you could structure this, once again, is up to you completely as a user. Now, there's a lot of work we do in the implementation with the client, and the idea is you can analyze and report at the levels you really wish. Okay, and there are a few things to note on this page. Permissioning is one, so a private assets analyst in your firm maybe should only have access to the assets under the operating company. That could be an option. Or an advisor who takes care of a specific list of clients should not be seeing data on the rest of the clients in the firm. The idea is to filter out this list that you could be clicking on. Also, participations. We can also assign a percentage ownership or participation of specific family members within a legal entity, so you can get a proper view of exposures and assets in general. Also, cash flow movement. The operating company might be lending to the financial company, so this also must be traceable. And finally, the stamping of data. In this case, the ownership structure might be looking like this today, but if it changes at any point in time, we want to make sure that those historical exposures, performance, risk, analytics, and so forth adapt accordingly. And of course, Sesame is not just about data management and consolidation. Our platform also allows you to visualize a great load of customized analytics and be able to take decisions from it. This is the main empowered decision making is what we all want from a platform like this. And the first thing you'll see, for example, is the performance overview. You'll find a fun fact sheet style overview with expo statistics. We're talking about returns, volatility, drawdown, Sharpe ratio, information ratio, et cetera, Also a cumulative performance graph in which we can click on, zoom in, change the time frame of the analysis. We can also select a specific period for that, all against the benchmark of our choice at this level, in this case at FO Holdco level, and of course the monthly historical performance. Additionally, you can of course add and remove parameters, clicking on those three dots, clicking on settings. You can also export components in the same way I've shown you in the dashboard. That's the idea throughout all pages. Also change the reference date of the analysis. This will change directly. And of course, the scope. So you can switch between clients, entities, and sub-entities, and of course, portfolio. So we can click on that Pictet multi-asset, and we'll get this sort of analysis for this scope. So let's go to contribution analysis. That is something we could also do. So here, we can completely slice and dice our investment data. We can observe our general P&L month to date and year to date. We can also see our top contributors, the detractors, and a more tabular view of whichever grouping of data we want based on the intentions we have, not to take decisions. So if we were to understand country exposure, we could group by country in this case. On the fly, this will change, right? We'll be able to see not only at aggregated level, but the actual holdings and their different stats, their P&Ls, their market values, the share we have within this whole client, let's say. So in this case, there's an investment in Red Lion in Suites of 12.8% of the portfolio. That's a lot. And one interesting thing here is clearly you can play not only with one parameter, but a combination of these. By clicking on settings once again, not only can we select those parameters of interest, but the types of groupings we want to do. So we might want to select group by asset category, then asset type, but before that by risk country, for example. So I'd be able to move that in order, click on save, and with a click of a button, we'll see that updated. So if I were to zoom in, we have our risk country first, our asset category, our asset type, and then the underlying holdings for this scope and these set of parameters that we've prefixed. Now, exposures, that is something we can look into clearly. As an overview, you'll see your historical AUM, the current breakdown of your assets, and historical net exposure. If we click on holdings, we'll get a more granular view on this. You'll be able to customize the breakdowns we want, both current and historical exposures by portfolio, by asset class, sectors, region, country, or even currency. If we click on currency, all outputs would adapt, both tabular form and the charts themselves, right? Once again, quick reminder, you can add or remove parameters as needed. You can export components data to Excel and PDF, change the reference date once again, and the client scope, whether it's a client sub-entity level or portfolio, to have that view. Works in the same way. Now, moving on to private assets. Okay, let's use our asset owner as an example. And what we'll see here is, let me prefix this to show you the list of funds. What we'll see here is really the overall metrics of our private asset side. So here we're looking at $16 million in commitments, cumulative, then also the capital calls, distributions, what's remaining of those commitments, and how much allocation do we have to these private funds in particular, 5.3% in this case, at this date for this client. Of course, we also enable you to see those single funds. So what the vintage is, the commitments, capital calls, of course, those multiples relative to this client. Let me switch to another client, for example, just for the sake of it, asset owner. Let's switch a date. And the idea is that we'll see those underlyings with their multiples, and of course, calculations like IRR to understand how these individual instruments are performing for us. Okay. And an interesting note here on Sesame in general, actually, is that you'll be able to create your own classification or your internal tagging to the different assets, which adds a touch of, let's say, flexibility to the way you can analyze and report. In this case, we've grouped these assets in this way. We first have a top level that differentiates between co-investments, fund of funds, and secondaries, but then we get more granular and we're looking at whether it's venture capital funds, real estate, venture growth, or even leverage buyout. Okay, so this is a way to look at private assets data. One more thing to say here is that, well, you can look into those single assets. Let's choose one for the sake of this example. Let's choose Hudson Bay Funds Vintage 2017. And clearly what we see here is the total capital calls, the distributions throughout time. In other words, your J curve, and also our historical multiples to keep track of how this asset in particular has been performing. Okay. Additionally, we also have a similar page in which you can analyze your hedge funds grouped into the different alternative strategies. So event-driven, arbitrage, multi-strategy works in the same way. Now, let's move on and take a look at our cash breakdown. In this case, what could be done here? Well, we could, for example, group by custodian in this case. We might want to better understand the breakdown of those cash accounts. Or, for instance, we'd be able to make sure our liquidity in a particular account, say our euro cash account in our PICTE as a custodian, how much of that we have available to cover for future capital calls for certain private equity investments. No? So that could be, let's say, a practical way of using this page. More on the transactional level, let's say, let me choose this proper scope. We also have the possibility of displaying these. Clearly, we're receiving not only positions, but transactions. The idea is you can observe those single movements associated to the individual assets. So that could be from deposits and withdrawals, so pure movements or transactions, purchases, sales, capital calls, distributions, and also expenses. It could be tax expenses, bank fees, and so forth. So the idea is that we're helping you in an automatic way tag that flux of information that's flowing into the system and give it a standard view. And an interesting thing here is that, well, this really helps many of our clients reconcile their flows with their accounting systems. In fact, we actually have the tech capabilities to feed data by an API we've developed into accounting systems too, okay, via our Sesame data product we've presented in past webinars, and I'm sure will be the topic of future ones. Okay. More on the compliance side, I think that's an interesting topic. Let me choose the proper scope. Let's switch to, for example, FO Holdco, in particular, the financial company, this level of entity that we've prefixed initially in our implementation. And the idea here is that you can create sophisticated rules to avoid, say, breaching your investment policy or risk limits, and receive alerts via the dashboard itself. There's a communication system within, and also via our app. Okay, so this really serves for KPI management and to have control over your exposures, for example, whichever level of aggregation you are interested in, and also for specific dates that you might want. So from position to portfolio to entity, or even groupings of these. And there's things like analyzing the minimum amount of cash we want to ensure in a specific portfolio, to cover our private equity capital calls, for example, or performance limits on a particular stock. That could also be another option. Also volatility, maximum volatility values we want to deal with within our multi-asset portfolio within a particular bank. This is all possible in terms of customization and implementation of limits. Okay, so let's now move on to a very big part of our platform, which is our reporting center. So this is one of our most powerful functionalities, I have to say. We've built the rest of the platform with this tool. All those outputs we've seen up till now, and you'll see they're quite similar in this case. But on the one hand, we have what we call our PDF publisher. There's two options here for reporting: PDF publisher, which is where you'll be able to build professional and visually compelling reports in minutes, and also use, as you can see here, pre-configured templates and components to save you time. And on the other hand, I'll just make a quick mention, but deserves a whole other webinar for this, which is this is Grid, an interactive analysis and a modeling tool built on the foundation of integrated Sesame data. You can ultimately use templated reports with predefined assumptions, but also give you the flexibility to make your own models with automated metrics and custom formulas. So common uses here that you could see on screen, well, you could do multi-asset cash flow forecasting or target asset allocation analysis for our private assets that we've seen before. And for an MFO in particular, very important, maybe client fee calculation. So to have control over the fees you expect clients to pay for your services. We do have models for this, and we typically work with clients to build more of these. And nonetheless, let's create a publisher report from scratch for a particular client in this case. Okay, so we'd be creating one for scratch. We click on Create Report, Publisher. Then we're going to have to, let's see, this loads now. We're going to be giving it a title, of course. Let's just say Client A's consolidated report. And we begin by, well, designing it by profiting from our giant library of components. Okay, with our drag and drop function, we could select all these outputs, whether we want to build them from scratch, starting from the type of charge and then fill in the parameters, or use predefined outputs that we've created that are typically useful for clients we already work with, right? We build these over time, and let's just make an example. In this case, let's say we want to see our holdings. So we're going to select our holdings. We're going to drag and drop. We're going to size it as we wish. Then let's say we want exposure breakdown, to be specific. This is a predefined template that will show our exposure by country. Let's put it right below holdings. And let's say we also want historical exposures. Historical exposures. This will be a chart flowing over time. So we would then select our metrics of interest on the right. We would give it a bit of styling. There's plenty of flexibility in the way you can report here. And well, ultimately, once we're comfortable with what the output is supposed to be, we'd click on preview. Okay, and this is how it would look like after a few seconds of building and playing around with the module. So we have our holdings table, that tabular form we've been seeing a lot in Sesame, in the actual dashboard. As you can see, you can zoom in. You can edit from here too while you're visualizing it, not only in the edit mode. And below, we'll find our other components, exposure by country. We've got all these different countries with our long exposure, short, net. In this case, long and net is the same. There's no leverage. And also historical exposure, all at country level. We could potentially switch the parameter of interest and say we don't want to analyze risk country, but actually by asset type. We could do that too. Save, and it will adapt accordingly, as you can see. Okay. This is the purpose of the builder. Of course, we can choose the scope. If I don't want to do it for the FinCo and I want to do it at the higher level, which is this client called FO Holdco, it would do it in the same way. Okay, and then we would click on PDF, and it would construct what you might expect from here. A few seconds, it will give me this output. Clearly, there's more work that should be done, but certainly there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed in the way we could work. Another example, a bit more complete, that we've branded is this one, where we have an account summary, we have the fund fact sheet, contribution analysis, and so forth. This should give you a proper idea of what we're capable of. And importantly here, coming back to the reporting, of course, you can schedule these reports. You can make sure that these are sent at the beginning of every month, for example. You can send them in the form of Excel, PDF. You could select the report that you already have constructed. Maybe it's an alternative investments report, and so forth, right? You can definitely do those in bulk also and cover, let's say, client 1, client 2, client 3. I want to send them the alternative investments report. That is all a possibility. Okay. We also have a document repository where you can store, tag, and filter all your personalized documents. So it could be those consolidated reports, could be specific reports for public and or private assets, statements, regulatory documentation, tax-specific docs, and so forth. And you get the idea. And finally, well, I think the Manage tab, the place where you can really manage those internal workflows. It is a place to interact with your colleagues, to interact with clients. And the idea is that you can keep track of your assets and entities, also link documents, contacts, and companies. Okay, it is a very user-friendly part of the platform in which you can collaborate, as I said, exchange ideas, and play around a lot. Okay. And well, I think that should be enough on my side, Amy. I'm conscious about time, so I hope this is given a broad overview of the applications of Sesame, in particular for multifamily offices.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alvaro. That was a great overview. It's great to see how the system is truly built for maximizing efficiency for our multi-family office clients. So we did have a few questions, again, as you say, conscious of time, but a few did come into the chat. So first question, can Sesame's reporting and risk profiling be customized to align with different client requirements?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Sesame is equipped with those sophisticated tools that I've been showing that enable in-depth compliance assessments, analytics. We've seen the limits monitoring capability, for example, and all this can be tailored to the unique needs of each client. Okay, so the level of customization is very high indeed.
Great. And you touched on this one a little bit already, but one of the questions was, can I fully customize reports, both in terms of content and branding?
Yep, Sesame allows you to fully customize reports, not just in terms of the data and insights that I've shown you, but also the branding. There was a styling feature on the right. I'm sure you've seen it before. And you can adjust, layouts, integrate your logo, your firm's logo, and incorporate your preferred colors if you were to speak about designing elements. So yeah, the idea is to meet client-specific requirements, but also reflect your firm's brand. every time you report and do work for your client.
Excellent. And then last question, what security and compliance measures are in place to protect sensitive financial information, especially when I'm working across multiple jurisdictions and beneficiaries?
Well, I haven't mentioned this, but Landytech is ISO 27001 certified, which means that it's the gold standard in information security management, meaning we adhere to rigorous, let's say, protocols for risk management and encryption and access control. Okay, so that is one point. On another note, we can also say that our accounts and spaces feature ensures that only authorized individuals can access or edit, particular sets of data. We talked about permissioning when I was showing you the ownership structures. So the idea is to give the user full control and a logical access based on the role he's playing within the multifamily office setup. Now, this ensures compliance with regulatory requirements across those multiple jurisdictions, and also helps with the safeguarding of clients' information and minimizing that risk.
Thanks, Alvaro. Thank you very much, and hopefully see you again next time.
Bye-bye.